Mia, his wife, steps directly into his path, cutting off his forward momentum, and the first glaring anomaly, she is wearing designer sunglasses.
Indoors.
Yes, indoors at baggage claim, under that harsh, unforgiving, fluorescent airport lighting. She has these large, dark shades firmly on her face.
That's a strange detail.
Right, and she throws her arms around his neck and she breathes the word baby. But the narrator describes the tone as entirely wrong.
How so?
He says it is too bright, too quick. It totally lacks the warmth of their 7 years of marriage. And crucially, he notes that as she presses against him, he can feel her heart absolutely hammering against his chest. It's not the flutter of excitement you get when you see someone you love. It is the heavy, frantic, concussive pounding of someone who has just sprinted away from a disaster.
Yeah, the physiological fight-or-flight response is just in full command of her body right there.
Totally.
I mean, let's look at those sunglasses. Wearing sunglasses indoors is not just a quirky fashion statement here. In this context, it is a primitive psychological barrier.
A barrier, like she's hiding.
Exactly. The sunglasses act as a literal shield. We rely heavily on the old adage that the eyes are the windows to the soul, right?
Right.
But in behavioral psychology and kinesiology, the ocular region is the primary leakage point for deception and extreme fear.
Oh, fascinating. Leakage point.
Yeah. The muscles around the eyes, the microcontractions, the dilation of the pupils, these are autonomic responses. You cannot consciously control them.
So she knows her eyes will give her away.
Precisely. By covering her eyes, Mia is instinctively trying to mask those microexpressions. She's trying to dam up the uncontrollable flow of information her face is broadcasting.
And that pounding heart.
That is pure cortisol and epinephrine flooding her bloodstream.
Yeah.
She is in a state of extreme sympathetic nervous system arousal.
Wow.
Her body is literally preparing for a physical fight for survival, and she is trying to pass it off as a loving embrace.
And you know, the physical mechanics of the hug give it away entirely, too.
What could she do?
She clutches the back of his jacket, gripping the fabric for just a second too long, and then her grip loosens, almost like she suddenly remembers she has an audience and has to play a part.
Overcompensating.
Right. She pulls away and she gives him the smile, and the narrator says it's the kind of smile that looks perfect from 20 feet away, but up close, it is completely hollow.
That is chilling.
It is a panicked, desperately rehearsed expression. It stands in this stark, heartbreaking contrast to the genuine, carefree moments of their past.
But just as he is trying to process why his wife is acting like, a poorly programmed android,
Right, exactly.
we get the introduction of a completely wild card element, something that doesn't fit the cheating script at all.
Yes. The flight attendant, this is where the scene moves from unsettling to completely surreal.
Oh, it really does.
So Mia says, "You're early," and she shoots this tiny, frantic, nervous glance right over the narrator's shoulder.
The dreaded look behind you?
Yeah. He says that glance lands in his stomach like a lead weight. He turns, and standing right behind Mia is a flight attendant in a standard Navy uniform.
Just standing there.
Just standing there. She is staring at the two of them with this strange, frozen deer-in-the-headlights expression.
Oh, awkward.
Then she steps forward, invading their personal space, and says the narrator's name softly, Mr. Carter, like she already knows exactly who he is.
Which is completely outside normal airport protocol.
Right. She holds out a small white envelope, and she whispers, "He said not to let your husband see this."
Wow. Just dropping a bomb.
Let's pause right there, okay? Let's unpack this. Think of a classic magician's misdirection.
Okay.
You go to a magic show, and the illusionist makes a huge, sweeping, dramatic gesture with his right hand. He throws flash powder, or he releases a dove.
Right, to grab your attention.
Exactly. Your eyes, your entire cognitive focus is violently drawn to that spectacle. Why? Because while you are staring at the flashy distraction, his left hand is quietly palming the coin or slipping the card into his sleeve.
The real trick is happening elsewhere.
Yes. Mia's aggressive, too fast, suffocating hug was the flashy hand waving in the air.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
She was physically overwhelming his senses, flooding his touch, his hearing, his sight, so he wouldn't have the cognitive bandwidth to notice the secret being maneuvered right behind her back.
She's trying to blind him with affection to hide the deception.
Exactly.
That functional misdirection is exactly what is happening. And the flight attendant acts as the chaotic variable that entirely ruins the trick.
Ruins it completely.
Right. Mia is desperately trying to manage an incredibly volatile secret, carefully orchestrating this elaborate sensory distraction, And the flight attendant just bypasses the firewall and forces the secret directly into the light.
And look at the sheer bizarre nature of this interaction. The narrator notes that the envelope is thin, folded once, and the corner of the paper is slightly damp.
Ah, yes, the dampness.
I mean, of all the details in the source material, that one made my skin crawl. It is so visceral.
It's visceral because it communicates a massive amount of hidden context.
Right. Why is the paper damp?
Well, it strongly suggests that this envelope wasn't just casually slipped into a purse or a briefcase. It was hidden nervously in a pocket, pressed against a body.
Oh, wow.
It was gripped tightly by sweating, shaking hands. Human fear sweat, produced by the apocrine glands, actually has a different chemical composition than sweat produced to cool the body down.
Wait, really? It's chemically different?
Yes, it is literally steeped in anxiety. The physical object itself carries the biological residue of the sheer terror surrounding it.
That is incredible and terrifying.
And the flight attendant's behavior is deeply telling, too. She holds the envelope with just 2 fingers, not quite touching his hand.
Right, like it's radioactive.
Exactly. Almost as if she is handing him a live explosive device. She is profoundly uncomfortable because she is breaching the standard, unspoken social contract of her profession.
Because flight attendants are supposed to be professional, polite, and out of the way.
Right. Service workers in airports are trained to be invisible facilitators. By stepping into a deeply personal, clearly volatile domestic situation, she is violating all her training.
Which means the stakes must be huge.
Exactly. She whispers that devastating line, "He said not to let your husband see this," while deliberately looking past the husband, locking eyes directly with Mia.
And Mia's reaction is instantaneous. Her smile just drops. It falls off her face for half a second before she manages to aggressively paste it back on.
Mask slips.
Yeah. The narrator takes the envelope and Mia tries to play it off. She laughs again, way too loud, completely lacking genuine amusement, and says, "Probably a mistake."
Sure, just a mistake.
But as she says it, she reaches for the envelope. She tries to snatch it out of his hands, and her hand just freezes in midair when the narrator instinctively pulls it back out of her reach.
Oof. That hesitation.
That tiny pause, that frozen hand hovering in the empty space between them, it communicates 1,000 times more than her empty laugh ever could.
It's the moment the architectural integrity of the illusion just completely fails.
It all comes crashing down.
Yeah. The ambient airport noise keeps moving around them. Heels clicking on the linoleum, a child crying over by baggage carousel 4, the rattle of a suitcase.
But for the narrator, it's silent.
Right. The world has suddenly shrunk. It has collapsed down to just the blood pounding in his own ears and the damp, slightly warped envelope in his hand.
The physical reaction is so intense.
The physiological response he experiences is incredibly telling. He describes his mouth going dry so fast it feels like he swallowed dust.
Yeah.
That is not a metaphor. That is the immediate cessation of salivary gland function due to a massive sudden spike in adrenaline.
Oh, because his body's shutting down.
Exactly. His autonomic nervous system is shutting down non-essential bodily functions because it is preparing for a devastating, life-altering blow.
So we have established this baseline of absolute chaos. The misdirection has failed entirely. The secret object is now in his possession.
The bomb is in his hands.
Exactly. And from here, the narrative takes us into how the human brain, when handed a terrifying mystery, begins to systematically construct a nightmare.
Right.
Having been handed this damp envelope, his attention is now hyper-focused. He transitions instantly from being a tired, slightly annoyed traveler to an active, hyper-vigilant investigator in his own life.
It's a sudden shift in identity.
When your brain hits that wall of sensory overload, it starts scanning the environment for anything that makes sense. He begins cataloging inconsistencies.
This is where the human brain's evolutionary tendency for pattern recognition becomes our worst enemy.
Because it finds patterns that aren't there.
Well, when faced with an information deficit, the brain will desperately stitch together whatever fragments it can find to build a coherent story, even if that story is horrific.
And the fragments he finds are terrifying. He notices 3 specific things in rapid succession.
What's the first one?
First, the phone. Mia is aggressively smoothing her blouse, trying to project this aura of normalcy, but the narrator notices her phone is face down in the palm of her hand.
Face down. Classic.
And it is buzzing over and over again. Every time the screen lights up, she actively, awkwardly turns her wrist to angle the screen away from him.
Shielding it.
Yes. But he catches a glimpse. The caller ID flashes, and he only catches the first letter, D.
Just D.
Just D. When he asks who is blowing up her phone, she doesn't miss a beat. She says, work, and then immediately tacks on, or maybe spam, with a laugh that is described as dry and thin as paper.
Ah, the double excuse. Work or spam.
Is that a known psychological tell?
Oh, absolutely. In statement analysis and forensic psychology, this is a massive indicator of cognitive overload.
Really?
When people construct a lie on the spot, they often feel a subconscious panic that a single excuse isn't robust enough to withstand scrutiny.
So they just add more lies.
Exactly. So they offer multiple, sometimes logically contradictory explanations to try and build a wider alibi.
That makes a lot of sense.
But to a suspicious mind, the double excuse acts as a glaring neon sign. It shows that the speaker lacks confidence in their own deception. It's the verbal equivalent of building a wall out of cardboard.
Right on the heels of the phone comes the second anomaly. While Mia is anxiously tucking her hair behind her ear, another self-soothing gesture, I imagine.
Yes, definitely.
And the narrator notices a ring on her finger. And it is absolutely not her wedding ring.
Oh.
It is an unfamiliar, thin silver band with a dark, opaque stone in the center that catches the harsh fluorescent light. He points it out. He asks, "Since when do you wear that?"
And how does she react?
Mia performs this incredibly unnatural gesture. She turns her hand over under the light, extending her fingers as if she is noticing this piece of jewelry on her own body for the exact same time he is. Oh, that's so fake.
Right, and she dismisses it with a wave of her hand saying, just something I picked up.
What's fascinating here is the casualness of the dismissal is entirely disproportionate to the context of the situation.
It's too casual.
Exactly. And look at the narrator's internal cognitive process here. He notes that he feels like he has seen the shape of that ring before.
Yeah, it feels a weird recognition.
He wonders if it's buried in some memory that doesn't fit the life he thought they had built together. His subconscious mind is already furiously trying to connect this anomalous physical object to a hidden, darker narrative.
It's searching for a match.
It is searching the archives of his memory for a match.
But even with the buzzing phone and the strange ring, the brain can try to make excuses, right?
Sure.
But what you cannot excuse, what you cannot rationalize away, is a direct assault on your primal senses. And that brings us to the third clue.
The physical environment. Yeah. The narrator takes a physical step back and looks at her luggage. Now, the context here is vital. Mia was supposed to have been away for 4 days on a girls' trip to Houston.
Okay, 4-day trip.
Over those 4 days, she was practically a ghost. She was barely reachable. She blamed bad hotel Wi-Fi, a dying phone battery, travel exhaustion.
Classic red flags.
But as he looks down at her feet, he realizes her suitcase is entirely wrong.
Long how?
The old, reliable blue suitcase, the one with the busted wheel he had lovingly patched up with duct tape, is missing. In its place is a sleek black carry-on that he has never seen before in his life.
Oh, wow.
And it is heavily scuffed near the zipper, like it has been dragged through something rough. When he asks about her blue bag, she answers almost before he finishes the sentence. Check.
Just checked. Boom. Quick answer.
Yeah, too quick.
What's fascinating here is that the visual discrepancy of the luggage acts as a catalyst. It triggers an even deeper, far more ancient sensory analysis.
What do you mean by ancient?
The visual anomaly forces his brain to open the floodgates to other sensory inputs. He's no longer just looking, he's absorbing everything.
Well, the smell. He suddenly inhales, and the scent hits him like a physical blow.
Yes. The olfactory system. We have to understand how this works mechanically in the brain.
Okay, lay it on me.
The olfactory bulb has a direct, unmitigated neural highway to the amygdala, which is the emotional and threat detection center of the brain, and the hippocampus, which handles memory formation.
So it bypasses logic?
Scent bypasses the logical reasoning centers of the neocortex entirely. It goes straight to emotion and memory.
So when the narrator suddenly registers the scent clinging to her jacket,
it hits hard.
It really does. It is not her normal, familiar perfume. He describes it vividly, breaking it down into distinct notes.
What does he smell?
Cedar, something sharp and almost metallic, like cheap hotel soap, and the unmistakable lingering undertone of men's cologne or aftershave.
Oh, that is devastating.
It creates a profound state of cognitive dissonance.
It's like a software crash in the brain.
A crash.
Yes. The brain is holding two violently conflicting pieces of information. On one side, you have this stated, accepted narrative. My wife was on a 4-day girls' trip to Houston.
Right.
On the other side, the raw, undeniable sensory data. I am smelling cedar metallic hotel soap and another man's cologne on her clothes. The system simply cannot reconcile the two.
I mean, imagine standing there. You are holding this slightly damp envelope covered in foreign handwriting. You are looking at a phone relentlessly buzzing with a caller ID of D.
It's a nightmare.
You are staring at an unexplainable dark stone ring, strange scuffed luggage, and you are literally inhaling the scent of another man on your wife's jacket.
The architecture of paranoia is fully constructed at this point.
It is. He is stringing together all these classic, agonizing tropes of infidelity in real time.
Right.
But I really have to push back on the narrator's reaction here because, honestly, if my spouse shows up at an airport smelling like a hotel and another man, and a flight attendant hands me a secret envelope, I am not waiting around to politely ask about luggage.
You'd open it.
I am ripping that envelope open immediately. Why did he stand there and tell himself, as he says in his account, that maybe she just borrowed a coat from someone?
Yeah, the denial is strong.
Why did he tell himself he was just turning a smell into a story because his travel nerves were rattled?
Because you are underestimating the profound, almost paralyzing power of psychological self-preservation.
Self-preservation by ignoring the evidence.
Exactly. This is cognitive dissonance operating as a defense mechanism.
Okay, explain that.
To accept the reality that the raw sensory data is suggesting, to accept that his wife of 7 years is having a blatant, sloppy, humiliating affair and parading the evidence in front of him is to accept the immediate, catastrophic destruction of his life.
I mean, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
It means the destruction of his identity as a husband, the destruction of his safety, the end of his known world.
That's a lot to process in baggage claim.
The human brain will prefer a comfortable, localized lie over a devastating, systemic truth right up until the exact microsecond. The evidence becomes completely insurmountable.
So he's not being dumb?
His hesitation isn't cowardice, and it certainly isn't stupidity. It is a desperate, unconscious delaying tactic.
Wow.
The brain requires time to build temporary emotional scaffolding before it allows the wrecking ball to make contact.
That is a great way to put it.
He is actively minimizing the clues, telling himself it's just a borrowed coat, it's just spam callers, to protect his core sense of reality from collapsing right there on the arrivals floor.
That is a fascinating way to frame it. It's like standing on a trapdoor. You hear the mechanism unlash, you know you are going to fall, but you absolutely refuse to shift your weight until gravity physically forces you downward.
Yes, exactly.
And in this story, gravity comes walking back over in the form of the flight attendant.
She back.
Because just as he is trying to talk himself down off the ledge, just as he is trying to convince himself he's turning a weird smell into a tragic story, the flight attendant steps right back into their orbit.
The external agent of chaos refuses to let the denial hold.
She comes just close enough to make it look like she's merely passing by the carousel, and she delivers the final lethal blow to his rationalization.
What does she do?
She doesn't whisper this time. She says, quietly but with absolute firmness, "Sir, you should really read that before you get in the car."
Oh, wow.
Mia's reaction is violent. Her head snaps toward the flight attendant. The muscles in her jaw go completely rigid, and she snaps, "That's not necessary."
The mask is fully off now.
The flight attendant lowers her eyes, adopting a posture of submission like she knows she crossed a dangerous line. But the narrator notes that Mia's reaction is totally wrong for the situation.
Wrong in what way?
It's too sharp, it's too controlled. She doesn't sound like a confused wife. She sounds like a commanding officer barking an order.
The power dynamic shifts visibly, and the narrator catches it.
Yes, he does.
He realizes instantly that these two women know each other. There is a pre-existing relationship or understanding here.
And when he directly asks Mia if she knows the attendant, Mia denies it with terrifying speed.
Of course she does.
But the flight attendant's face betrays the lie. The narrator describes her expression as that specific look people get when they desperately want to warn you about something, but they are terrified to say a dangerous word out loud.
That is so descriptive.
And then the visual kicker, he notices that the flight attendant has a second envelope tucked securely under her arm.
Wait, a second one?
Yes. It is identical to the first. Small, white, with the exact same neat, black, unfamiliar handwriting.
The panic is escalating exponentially now. The internal paranoia, the quiet cataloging of clues, is suddenly bleeding out into the open.
It is manifesting into a chaotic, undeniable external.
The tension upgrades from a quiet, suffocating suspicion to an inevitable, outright confrontation. We are moving toward the collision at baggage claim.
The collision. I like that.
The physical environment around them starts mirroring his internal psychological state. The chaos is externalizing.
So Mia takes a step closer to him, invading his space again. She lowers her voice to a harsh whisper, and she uses a phrase that acts as a massive, buried emotional trigger.
What does she say?
She says, "Can we please just go? You're making this weird."
Harsh.
Weird. The narrator is immediately transported back in time. He remembers that this is the exact same word with the exact same defensive inflection that she used years ago during her last semester of college before they were married.
Oh, wow. A direct echo from the past.
He had asked her why she was staying out so late, why her stories weren't adding up. Back then, the trust in their relationship hadn't been fully tested, and he let it go because he loved her and she cried.
But now,
But hearing that specific word now, under the harsh airport lights, surrounded by bizarre evidence, it acts as a retroactive confirmation of betrayal.
right, it tightens his throat.
He realizes he was right to be suspicious back then, and he is right to be suspicious now.
It acts as an emotional anchor. It links a past moment of vulnerability and suspected deception directly to the current crisis.
It's like proof.
And this is where the external narrative finally, violently forces his hand. The internal struggle to rationalize the sensory data is obliterated by a physical presence entering the stage.
The narrator turns around, prompted by Mia's increasingly panicked glances over his shoulder, and he sees a man standing near the baggage carousel.
The mysterious D.
Presumably.
Oh.
This man is staring right at them. He's described vividly tall, mid-30s, wearing a dark ball cap pulled low over his eyes.
Like he's trying to hide his face.
Yeah. One of his hands is resting casually on the handle of a black suitcase, which is almost certainly the match to Mia's unexplainable new carry-on, and his other hand is holding a phone.
Of course.
But he isn't looking at the narrator. He is looking dead at Mia, or at the damp envelope still clutched in the narrator's hand, or maybe both, and all the color instantly drains from Mia's face. The blood just leaves her skin.
The perceived rival has physically manifested.
Right in front of them.
The psychological threat he's been building in his mind is now a tangible, breathing entity approaching them.
It's real now.
Notice the pacing of the man's movements here, though. The man lifts his phone, checks the illuminated screen, calmly tucks it into his jacket pocket, and starts walking toward them.
Casually.
Yes. He is not walking fast. He is not rushed. He moves like a man who has all the time in the world, a man executing a deliberate plan.
Which is terrifying in its own way.
Exactly. This slow, measured, deliberate approach contrasts sharply and violently with the narrator's escalating, chaotic internal panic. It heightens this sense of inevitability.
Mia grabs the narrator's wrist. He notes that her fingers are ice cold, practically freezing.
That fear response again.
She whispers, her voice trembling, "Don't say anything, please. Not until we're outside."
Pleading.
And this is the moment the narrator almost completely detonates. He almost rips the envelope open with his teeth. He almost screams at her, demanding to know who the ring belongs to, demanding to know why a contact named D is calling her, why the flight attendant knows his name.
I don't blame him.
But he stops. And he stops because of a crucial, nuanced observation. He notes that Mia's voice, the tremor in her throat, sounds less like the guilt of a cheater and more like absolute, unadulterated fear.
That is a vital distinction, and it speaks to his deep, intimate, foundational knowledge of his wife, even through the blinding fog of his paranoia.
He knows her too well.
He recognizes the specific emotional texture of her panic. Guilt, especially the guilt of a discovered affair, is usually defensive.
Like getting angry.
Yes. It is deflective. It often rapidly mutates into anger or blame. But fear, pure survival-level fear, is paralyzing. It is pleading. It is focused entirely on mitigating immediate harm.
So the man in the ball cap reaches them. He stops just outside typical conversational distance.
Right.
He says the narrator's name, but he says it flatly, like he practiced the pronunciation in a mirror. Then he looks right past the narrator's shoulder, locks eyes with Mia, and says the 5 words that completely detonate the situation.
Which are?
She didn't tell you yet.
Oh, wow. It is an incredibly destructive line of dialogue.
It's just devastating.
It instantly implies a pre-existing plan, a shared timeline, a secret architecture that the narrator has been entirely excluded from.
Yeah, it confirms everything.
It confirms the existence of the conspiracy. It tells the husband, we share a reality that you do not.
Mia's hand digs into his arm, her nails biting into his skin.
Yeah.
The narrator crushes the envelope a little in his fist. There is this brilliant cinematic detail in the text where the airport announcements crackle with static overhead, completely unintelligible, right as the tension peaks.
That adds so much atmosphere.
The man in the cap, who will come to know as Daniel, gives this tired, almost pitying little laugh and says, So he's really here.
Pitying. That's interesting.
And Mia just closes her eyes. She physically slumps, like that sentence finally broke the structural dam inside her. The narrator's stomach completely drops out. Without even consciously deciding to do it, his hands are moving. The hesitation is gone.
He opens it.
He tears the damp paper of the envelope open, and out slides a thick, glossy stack of photographs.
Let's examine the specific visual evidence presented in these photos, because this is the supposed indisputable concrete proof of the infidelity narrative. This is the data his brain has been jetting.
He looks down at the first photo. It shows Mia walking down a carpeted hotel hallway, looking over her shoulder.
Okay. Suspicious.
The second photo is a tighter shot. It shows Mia leaning heavily into this strange man's chest, her hand on his jacket.
Ouch.
And the third photo, the one that makes the narrator's entire body go numb, shows Mia's face incredibly close to Daniel's. Their mouths are almost touching.
That's the smoking gun.
And stamped in the harsh yellow text in the corner is a timestamp from the night before. Below the stack of photos is a single printed piece of paper, a screenshot of a text message.
What does the text say?
It reads, "Tell him tonight. If he sees her first, it all falls apart."
Wow. Okay, the confirmation bias loop is now locked and sealed.
Right. It's undeniable.
Every single anomalous sensory clue, every strange behavior, the double excuses, the weird luggage, the damp envelope, the scent of cedar and cologne, it is all now perfectly, seamlessly explained by this horrific visual evidence.
The puzzle is solved.
The narrative of betrayal is structurally sound. The brain essentially says, I was right. My survival instinct was correct. I am being emotionally destroyed. My life is over. But at least the puzzle pieces finally fit together.
He stares at the printed words, and he says he feels something inside his chest split cleanly down the middle. He looks up at Daniel and asks, "Tell me what?" But he notes that his own voice sounds far away, like he's listening to someone else speak through a wall.
Dissociation.
And then the dam completely breaks. The public, exposed nature of this confrontation is so brutally humiliating. Mia desperately reaches for the photos, and he violently jerks away from her, shouting, "Don't!" much louder than he meant to.
The poor guy.
The volume breaks the social contract of the airport. People walking by turn their heads. A little boy dragging a backpack stops walking and stares. A suitcase rolls past on the carousel, and no one grabs it.
Time stands still.
He unleashes all the evidence he's been hoarding in his head. He starts yelling about the phone calls from D, the silver ring, the smell of the perfume, accusing her of dragging him to an airport just to publicly humiliate him with her new lover.
What we are witnessing is a complete loss of emotional regulation, which is entirely appropriate for the catastrophic level of trauma being inflicted on him.
He's just losing it.
He is hurling his accumulated observations like weapons. He is desperately trying to regain some microscopic sense of control over a reality that has violently suddenly slipped from his grasp.
By showing them he knows.
Exactly. By laying out the evidence, he's trying to show them that he's not a fool, that he sees the machinery of their deception.
But right here, in the middle of this screaming match, something doesn't track.
What do you mean?
Imagine standing there. You've got the glossy photos burning a hole in your hand. The guy is standing right in front of you. Your brain is screaming that this is a slam dunk. You caught them. The reality seems completely painfully obvious.
Right.
But the emotional resonance of the people involved is completely misaligned. The inputs do not match the outputs.
I see what you're saying.
I noticed this reading the source material, and the narrator notices it too, even through his rage. Mia doesn't react the way a cheater caught dead to rights in a lie reacts.
She doesn't fight back?
She doesn't get defensive. She doesn't attack his insecurity. She doesn't try to justify it. The narrator says she looks less like a cheater and more like someone drowning on dry land.
That fear again.
She looks at him with eyes so raw, so filled with absolute devastation that he almost hates himself for not understanding what he is looking at. She whispers, her voice breaking, "I didn't want you to find out like this."
And look at Daniel. Daniel's reaction is equally, jarringly incongruous with the established caught lover script.
It is completely bizarre.
Right.
The narrator yells at Daniel, "So it is true," and violently tells them both to get the hell away from him. And Daniel doesn't posture.
He doesn't puff off?
He doesn't puff out his chest or get aggressive. He just lifts both of his empty hands in a classic universal pacifying gesture and says calmly, "That's not what this is."
So calm.
The narrator demands to know who he is, screaming, asking if he's the boyfriend she's leaving him for, and Daniel says, "I'm not her boyfriend." But the narrator notes that his delivery is strange.
Strange how?
It's practiced. It lacks any emotional heat. Daniel's demeanor is incredibly calm, almost weary, like a paramedic arriving at a messy scene.
Right.
He is actively managing a crisis. He is not reacting to a scandal. This professional, detached calmness contrasts so violently with the narrator's raw, unscripted, screaming panic that it creates a new kind of cognitive dissonance.
Because what Daniel is doing is classic, trained crisis de-escalation.
De-escalate.
Yes. He is dealing with a highly volatile, adrenalized individual who is operating on entirely false premises. Daniel's calculated calmness is a massive structural clue that the narrative of infidelity is a manufactured false construct.
Wow.
The emotional output of Mia and Daniel simply does not match the input of a discovered, sordid affair. They're acting like people defusing a bomb, not people caught in a lie.
But the narrator can't see the bomb yet. He is just firing questions rapidly, desperate for the ground under his feet to stop moving.
He needs answers.
He screams, "How long? A month? A year? Was the trip fake? Was the whole damn marriage fake to you?" And Mia just shakes her head over and over, tears streaming down her face, saying, no, none of this is what you think.
Heartbreaking.
His voice is cracking so badly, he says he scares himself. And then we hit the absolute wall. The momentum of the cheating narrative crashes into a solid, unmoving, incomprehensible object.
We enter the paradigm shift.
Yes, the paradigm shift.
This is the fulcrum of the entire experience. This is the exact moment the transition from a conventional, understood domestic drama pivots into a profound, reality-altering shock.
Everything changes.
The cheating narrative isn't just challenged, it is entirely dismantled and vaporized.
Daniel looks at Mia, who is sobbing into her hands. Then he looks up at the terminal ceiling, and the narrator says it looked like Daniel was physically weighing whether the truth was worth the sheer catastrophic damage it was about to cause to this man's brain.
He's deciding to pull the trigger.
And Daniel looks back down and says flatly, "She's not cheating on you." The narrator is furious. He is deeply insulted that this man would lie right to his face when he is literally holding the photographic proof in his crushed hand.
Of course he is.
And then Daniel delivers one of the most chilling, brilliant lines of the whole story. He says, his voice devoid of any emotion, "You saw what was meant for you to see."
You saw what was meant for you to see. Let's unpack the weight of that sentence.
Okay, let's unpack this.
That is not the language of a domestic dispute. That is the specialized language of espionage.
Espionage.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the core philosophy of tactical deception. What Daniel is revealing in that one sentence is that the entire scenario, the photos, the hotel, the misdirection, the damp envelope, was a deliberately constructed, engineered, false narrative.
They made it look like an affair on purpose.
Exactly. They weaponized the tropes of infidelity against him. Why? Because an affair, while emotionally devastating, is a mundane, earthly, predictable problem.
Right. It's something people understand.
It is a cover story that neatly explains strange behavior and completely stops people from looking for a deeper, infinitely more dangerous truth.
Oh, wow.
They brought high-level spycraft and operational security into a completely mundane suburban marriage. They gave his brain a puzzle it wanted to solve to keep it away from the real secret.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The narrator says that sentence, "You saw what was meant for you to see," was so strange, so cold and clinical, that he actually felt his physical center of gravity shift.
He's losing his balance.
The earth literally moves under his feet. The narrative stops making sense. Mia reaches into her leather purse, her hands shaking violently. She pulls out that thin silver ring.
Open from earlier.
The one with the dark stone, the one the narrator was absolutely convinced was a secret lover's token, a symbol of her betrayal.
Right.
She holds it out on her flat palm, her voice trembling so hard she can barely speak, and says, "It's not his. It's yours."
The physical object that served as the primary symbol of his betrayal is suddenly jarringly handed back to him as an artifact of his own life.
It's his ring.
The context of the object is inverted in a second.
He stares at the ring sitting on her shaking palm, completely bewildered. He doesn't want to touch it. Daniel quietly tells him to pick it up and turn it over.
He has to look at it.
The narrator slowly takes the cold silver ring. He turns it over under the harsh airport lights. And on the inside of the silver band, engraved in tiny, precise letters he had never noticed when it was on her finger, are initials.
His initials.
His own initials. And right below his initials is a date. A specific date from exactly 6 years ago.
Oh, God.
The exact horrific day he was told his brother Ethan had died in a catastrophic car crash.
I want to emphasize the sheer, crushing psychological weight of that moment. That engraving acts as a skeleton key.
Unlocking something terrible.
It is unlocking a door in his mind that he had permanently sealed, welded shut, and buried under 6 years of agonizing grief therapy.
He had moved on.
The human brain cannot seamlessly process this kind of data input. It creates an immediate catastrophic system failure. The foundational architecture of his reality is compromised.
He whispers, "No." Because his brother's name hasn't been spoken out loud in their family for years without breaking someone open. He tells them it's impossible. It's a sick joke.
Complete denial.
But Mia is openly sobbing now, her shoulders shaking, and he notes that even Daniel, the calm, collected operative, looks physically sick to his stomach watching this realization hit the narrator.
It's too painful to watch.
And Daniel steps closer and says, "He didn't die. Not the way you were told."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, let's talk about the psychological concept of ambiguous loss.
What's that?
Usually in psychology, this refers to situations where a loved one is physically missing, but psychologically present, like a soldier missing in action, or someone lost at sea where a body is never recovered.
Or like a kidnapping.
Right. Or, conversely, they are physically present but psychologically missing, like a parent fading from severe Alzheimer's.
Right, that makes sense.
It is a terrifying, open-ended grief without closure. What we are witnessing in this terminal is the exact inverse. It is an ambiguous resurrection.
An ambiguous resurrection, wow.
The narrator fought for closure. He processed horrific grief. He survived the worst trauma of his life over 6 long years. And that survival has just been violently, casually invalidated by a string of numbers inside a ring.
The narrator's physical reaction to this information is intensely described. He says the linoleum floor beneath him actually seems to tilt at a 15-degree angle. His vision narrows. His head suddenly feels completely stuffed full of thick static. And then Mia says the one sentence that makes the entire airport terminal, the people, the luggage, the announcements, just completely disappear around him.
What did she say?
She looks him in the eyes and says, "Your brother has been calling me for 2 weeks."
The sheer cognitive whiplash is almost impossible to quantify here.
It's too much.
Look at the timeline. In the span of maybe 5 to 7 minutes, he has gone from a bored husband picking his wife up, to a shattered victim of a devastating affair, to a man whose dead brother is somehow utilizing cellular networks to communicate from beyond the grave.
It's insane.
The human nervous system is simply not built with the capacity to absorb that kind of sequential, contradictory, compounding trauma without glitching.
He literally loses the feeling in his hands. The envelope drops to the floor. He just stands there while the noise of the airport keeps rushing around them, completely physically paralyzed.
He's crashed.
And Daniel steps in. Daniel lowers his voice, moving into his line of sight to ground him, and basically starts force-feeding him the logistical reality before the narrator's mind can completely shatter into a million irreparable pieces.
Daniel provides the logistical framework.
The facts.
Yes, the factual scaffolding that the narrator's brain desperately requires to anchor itself in this new, terrifying reality. Without the how, the brain will reject the what.
So Daniel explains, rapidly but clearly, that Ethan had not died in that fiery crash 6 years ago. The person in the driver's seat had been burned entirely beyond recognition.
A case of mistaken identity.
The dental records and the identification mistake were buried so incredibly deep by municipal bureaucracy and a bizarre set of circumstances that by the time anyone involved realized the error, Ethan had already vanished.
Why did he run?
He had been using a different name, keeping his distance, living entirely off the grid as a ghost. He was trying to find someone, just one single person from his old life who might still believe he was out there.
And he found Mia.
And months ago, purely by terrifying chance, Mia had spotted him at a gas station 3 states away.
Oh my God.
She was the first person he trusted enough to contact. Because she saw him and didn't immediately scream or go to the police or alert the family, she kept the secret.
We are now moving into the complex anatomy of a benevolent lie.
Benevolent lie.
Yes. Now that the impossible truth is laid bare on the table, the narrator's brain is forced to run the tape backward.
Right, reevaluating everything.
We have to take every single clue from the airport, the damp envelope, the panicked double excuses, the strange perfume, the changed scuffed suitcase, the terrified flight attendant, and completely reevaluate them.
None of it meant what he thought it meant.
Exactly. We are no longer looking at them through the cynical lens of a cheating wife, but through the harrowing lens of extreme protective terror.
Let's look at the actual reality of Mia's last few weeks. This changes everything about her erratic behavior. She wasn't having an affair. She was running a frantic, terrifying underground railroad for a dead man. She had been lying to her husband's face every day, yes, but she was lying to protect him from a truth she genuinely deeply believed would shatter his mind.
She was carrying a massive burden.
The photos were real. There was no Photoshop, no digital manipulation, but the context was completely artificially fabricated.
They staged it.
The picture of them in the hotel hallway, mouths close together, looking intimate. That was actually a photo of Mia covertly passing forged identity documents and a secure burner phone to Daniel so Ethan could stay hidden from whoever was looking for him.
Daniel wasn't her lover.
Daniel was the logistical operative helping her dead brother-in-law survive another week.
This is a textbook, extreme example of protective deception.
Protective deception.
Mia's physical terror at the airport. The pounding heart against his chest, the freezing cold hands, the desperate, aggressive plea not to make a scene, was never about the selfish fear of being caught in infidelity.
It was about Ethan.
It was the absolute crushing terror of being the messenger who upends her husband's hard-won grief. She was terrified of being the one to violently tear open a wound that had taken 6 grueling years to scar over.
And the strange ring.
She wasn't wearing it as a fashion statement or a gift. She was wearing it because it was the physical proof Ethan gave her to prove his identity, and she was too terrified to leave it out of her sight.
Oh, wow.
Her rehearsed lines, the sunglasses blocking her eyes, the sheer exhaustion. That was the immense, unsustainable physical and psychological toll of carrying a reality-breaking secret completely alone.
She tells him, speaking through her tears, that the minute she knew Ethan was alive, her first instinct was to run to her husband. She wanted to tell him.
But she didn't.
But Ethan made her promise not to, swearing her to secrecy until he was absolutely sure nobody dangerous was watching him, nobody that could hurt his brother.
He was protecting him too.
And Mia says to him, "Every time I tried to tell you, I heard my own voice in my head, and I knew how completely insane it would sound. I knew you would think I was losing my mind."
That's agonizing.
But I have to stop here, because this is where the story gets incredibly thorny.
Okay, let's hear it.
I hear what you're saying about the burden she was carrying, but honestly, even though her motives were entirely pure, and she was trying to save his brother's life and protect his feelings, she still completely gaslit him.
That's a strong word, but yeah.
She let him stand in an airport surrounded by strangers and think he was losing his mind. She let him believe his entire marriage was a fraudulent joke.
It's true.
Isn't a lie of protection, especially one this massive, this structurally destructive, still fundamentally a betrayal of trust?
That question is the core ethical and emotional conflict of the entire narrative. And the answer is incredibly messy.
Is it a betrayal?
Technically, strictly speaking, yes.
Yeah.
A fundamental pillar of marital trust was broken. Massive, life-altering information was purposefully withheld.
Right.
But to understand it, we have to look at how extreme trauma forces people into impossible choices. Mia was placed in a classic psychological double bind.
A double bind.
There was no good option. If she tells the truth immediately, she risks sounding completely unhinged. Your brother, who burned to death in a horrific crash 6 years ago, is alive and needs a burner phone in Houston. And more importantly, she risks Ethan's physical safety if the husband reacts badly, calls the police, or tells the wrong family member.
So telling the truth was dangerous.
Very. But if she keeps the secret, she has to lie to the person she loves most in the world, risking the destruction of her marriage.
She was trapped.
She was desperately waiting for safety. She made the harrowing, agonizing choice to prioritize Ethan's literal physical survival over her husband's immediate emotional comfort. She absorbed his suspicion, his anger, and his hatred to keep both of the men she loved safe.
The narrator realizes this as he stands there. He notes that this explanation made sense in a way that Betrayal never had.
It makes an ugly, painful sense.
It made an ugly, painful, complex sense. He thinks about all the times she pulled away from him over the last few weeks, all the times she frantically checked her phone in the middle of the night and hid the glowing screen.
All the clues he misread.
He realizes, with a deep sense of shame, how quickly he assumed the worst of her. How easily he turned his love into weaponized suspicion.
Because of his past trauma?
Because, as he notes in the text, he had been profoundly hurt before. Because the grief of losing his brother had taught his brain to always expect endings.
He was primed for disaster.
It was somehow easier, more computationally simple for his brain to imagine his wife cheating on him with a stranger than it was to imagine a miracle wrapped in a paranoid nightmare.
Which brings us to the profound, lingering weight of the aftermath.
The aftermath.
The adrenaline is fading and the reality of the damage is setting in.
He finally manages to swallow the massive lump in his throat. He looks at Daniel and asks the question he's been terrified to ask since Mia first said the name. Is he really alive?
And Daniel confirms it.
Daniel just nods once, a curt, professional movement, and says he is, but not safely.
He's still in danger.
Mia reaches out for his hand again, and this time he doesn't pull away. He lets her take it. But he notes a heartbreaking detail. He says her hand feels strange in his, like he is holding on to the past after it has already completely changed shape.
Poignant image.
Mia tells him that Ethan desperately wants to see him. But Ethan is terrified. He is paralyzed by fear of what his brother might think.
Because he abandoned him.
Terrified that the narrator will believe Ethan abandoned him on purpose. Terrified that his brother will hate him for letting him suffer through that agonizing closed casket funeral, through those 6 years of dark mourning intentionally.
And here we reach the deepest, most difficult, emotional insight of the narrative.
It really is.
The narrator comes to a staggering realization. A dead brother is one specific kind of pain. You mourn, you grieve, you go to therapy, you find a way to carry the ghost with you. The parameters of the relationship are fixed.
Right, they can't hurt you anymore.
But a living brother who thinks he is already forgiven.
That's different.
A brother who requires you to reconcile a perfect, mourned ghost with a flawed, breathing human being who made choices that caused you unimaginable agony. That is an entirely different, incredibly complex, inherently messy kind of pain.
The source text gives us this line that just stopped me in my tracks. Fear is harder to understand than betrayal.
That is profound.
Betrayal is easy, relatively speaking. It's clean. There is a clear victim and a clear villain. You get angry, you bring the photos in the sink, you call a lawyer, you divide the assets, you move on. The script is written.
Right. Society knows how to handle betrayal.
But fear is incredibly messy. Fear creates massive collateral damage among people who genuinely love each other.
It really does.
Mia loved her husband, so she lied to his face. Ethan loved his brother, so he hid in the shadows. The fear poisoned the well of their lives, even though every single person's intentions were grounded in survival, love, and protection.
It perfectly highlights how complex trauma isn't a neat puzzle to be solved.
No, it isn't.
Discovering the truth didn't fix the brokenness in that airport terminal. It just completely reorganized the debris. The structural damage remains.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. What does this all actually mean for them? The story ends, and we never actually see Ethan.
He doesn't appear.
The brother never walks out of the shadows in this narrative. There is no grand reunion scene. The entire focus of the text is purely on the impact of the revelation on the marriage.
That's true.
The couple doesn't fix everything in the airport. The narrator explicitly points that out.
Yeah.
They don't have a tearful, sweeping, movie magic reconciliation where all is forgiven and the music swells.
Because real life doesn't work that way.
He admits to Mia that for a few horrible, agonizing minutes, he truly believed she had destroyed him. And he admits that that belief came from his own deep-seated insecurities just as much as it came from her fake evidence.
It's a very honest admission.
They just stand there, exhausted, shaking under the fluorescent lights. The truth has finally settled between them, but it's settled in heavy pieces that are still incredibly sharp to the touch.
It is the most brutally realistic, emotionally authentic part of the entire account.
I agree completely.
A revelation of this sheer magnitude does not heal a relationship instantly. It shatters the existing foundation, so a new one, based on a radically different reality, can hopefully be built.
If they can build it.
When the narrator finally looks up, Daniel is gone. He vanished into the crowd. The flight attendant is gone.
Like ghosts.
The external agents of chaos have simply evaporated back into the ether of the airport, leaving the couple alone with the wreckage.
He is just left standing there, the ambient noise of the baggage claim washing over him, holding a thin silver ring with his own name carved inside it.
A message he never expected.
A message he never, ever expected to hear again. His brother was alive. And his whole life, his entire identity built, managed, and carefully curated over the last 6 years, would never, ever fit inside the story he had told himself about that day.
It serves as a profound, unsettling reminder of the fragility of our perception.
It really makes you think.
We walk around every single day, assuming the ground beneath us is solid rock. We build our marriages, our careers, our grief, our entire understanding of reality on that specific assumption.
But it's not always solid.
But sometimes, all it takes is a misplaced scent of cedar, a damp envelope handed over by a stranger, and a date engraved inside a silver ring to prove that the rock is actually thin ice. and it is actively cracking under our feet.
It is an incredible, exhausting journey, from the mundane, universal annoyance of an airport pickup, through the agonizing, suffocating accumulation of false clues and marital paranoia, to the absolute staggering revelation of a brother returning from the grave.
What a wild ride.
It forces us to look in the mirror at how quickly we build narratives to protect ourselves, and how devastating it is when those narratives are torn down, even when they are torn down for a good reason.
And it leaves us contemplating the true, hidden costs of survival, both the physical survival of the brother and the emotional survival of the marriage.
It really does. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering thought to explore on your own.
Something to ponder.
It's a concept that isn't directly answered in the story, but it is the heavy shadow hanging over every single word of the text. When a foundational truth of your life is completely rewritten,
Right.
when the absolute worst thing that ever happened to you is suddenly miraculously erased, do you still mourn the loss of the reality you survived?
Oh, that's a tough question.
Even if the new reality brings a deeply loved one back to life, it means the resilient, scarred person you became in order to survive their death has to die instead.
Wow.
How do you grieve the long, dark years you spent crying over a ghost when that ghost was actually walking the earth the entire time?
That's incredibly heavy.
It makes you wonder, the next time someone you love hugs you just a little too fast, a little too hard, what hidden reality are they desperately trying to keep you from seeing?